So I would say a very warm welcome to Rachael Shaughnessy and Michael Hourigan, and a huge thanks from the Career Service to you both for coming and joining us today for this Law Insight seminar. We're delighted to have you and I'm really looking forward to both of your presentations, which will give us an insight into, as Rachel's slides show, that the pathways to success as a career, as a solicitor or a barrister at law. And I think it's a super opportunity for our students to hear firsthand from those who have gone through that career path and to get some insights. I imagine to network with you afterwards. So, I'm guessing that potentially your LinkedIn boxes might start to be full after the event. And for those then that weren't able to join us today, thanks a million to you both for facilitating the recording of the session. So essentially we have like kind of in or around 45 minutes. I know you're both under time pressure, and Michael, you as I said, have just joined us like kind of, I'd say, from courtroom. So thanks a million again for attending, and we'll kick off, if that's okay, with Rachel's presentation. Rachael, you should be able to take over control of the presentation.
Yeah.
If you can't, let me know and I can move the slides along for you. So thanks, whenever Lynn. You're ready, thanks a million.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachael Shaughnessy and I'm a partner at Holmes Assist, which is an arm of Holmes O'Malley Sexton LLP, and we act for private clients. I myself specialise in medical negligence and personal injury cases. So just a little bit about Holmes O'Malley Sexton LLP. We're a full service law firm and we have our main office in Limerick. We also have offices in Dublin and Cork. And as I said, I work in Holmes Assist, which deals with private clients. And we also have Holmes who deal with our corporate clients. And we've been around since 1970, so for over 50 years. So there are 17 partners at the moment in Holmes O'Malley Sexton.
Can I check, Rachael? Sorry, are you moving along slides?
Yes, are they moving?
No, not for me.
Okay.
So do you want now? I mean, I'm clicking them forward. If you want to just
perfect. Yeah, if you want to just move to the next one. Perfect. Thanks, Elaine. So yes, we have 17 partners in Holmes O'Malley Sexton LLP, 38 solicitors with a headcount at the moment of about 135, and that can fluctuate because we do take in people on an interim basis. So I was saying to Elaine, we actually have a current UL law undergrad with us in Holmes Assist. We have been voted the 7th top employer in law by Grad Ireland, and we're very proud also to be winners of the Limerick Chamber Award for Best Employer for Talent Development and Workplace Wellness, and we've won Munster Law Firms of the Year in the past. So if you want to go to the next one, Elaine, thanks. So just a bit about becoming a solicitor, and I'll kind of tie in my journey here with that as well. Normally you would do an undergrad degree of 3 to 4 years, or else a postgrad in law. Not that you absolutely have to have a Bachelor of Laws to do the FE1s, which are the entrance exams to Coop Place. But I suppose most people who have an interest in becoming a solicitor would want to have some background in law, supposed to ensure from their own point of view that that's what they want to do, and obviously it would make those entrance exams much more doable. So I myself did a Bachelor of Laws in Law and European Studies and graduated in 2006, and I would have done law with French and sociology. But I suppose one of the main things that really helped me in my decision during my undergrad to decide whether I really wanted to embark on the process of doing the FE1s, which are quite difficult exams, was my co-op placement. So I was helped by the co-op office in UL, and I was placed after a successful interview with Dillon Eustace in Dublin, who primarily are a funds-based law firm. But whilst I was there doing mostly company law, I managed to get down to the Four Courts a couple of times during my placement, and I really thought it was something that I was interested in, and made the decision, I suppose, at the end of my degree to go on and do the FE1s. And I had done quite well. I got a first class honours, and I had been offered the opportunity to do research and stay on at UL, but I, with my own personality and interest, felt that I wanted to go down a more practical route. So once you have your degree, whether it's an undergrad or postgrad, if you want to become a solicitor, you must undertake the FE1 exams. So we'll go through these in a little bit more detail in a moment, but once you have the FE1s completed, you then must secure a training contract. And that's actually probably the hardest thing to do. It's a very competitive climate, but I'll give you some tips and explain how I got mine. And then you do a practical professional course with Blackhall Place in Dublin. Now, traditionally, and when I was doing it, you would do the professional practice course 1 for 7 months, followed by some in-office training for 12 months. Then you'd go back and do a 3-month course and do the final part of your training. That's now changed going forward, where they're doing a hybrid model where they're joining PPC1 followed by PPC2 consecutively. So you do all the course in one go and then do your office training. And also there's an option to do some of the practice course online. So that gives more people access to the course as opposed to physically having to be up in Dublin. And then you're qualified. So that's the, I suppose, the path. And we'll go into that a little bit more detail now. Thanks, Elaine. So in relation to the FE1s, as I said, they're the entrance exams to the Law Society, and they're usually held twice a year in March and October. You normally sit them at the Red Cow Hotel in Dublin, and they usually have a provision to sit them in Cork as well for those who will be further away from Dublin, and they cost €150 per exam. You must pass all 8 before attending Blackhall, and in the past you had to get at least 3 on your first attempt to keep those and move forward, but apparently that's now been abandoned, and you can do one and then do another one. So it enables people who are working to kind of manage things a bit better, because it can be very difficult to try and do a lot of them at once. You can also sit them now apparently during your undergraduate degree. That wasn't the case before, but it might tie in with the subjects that you're studying, and that might be helpful. I know a lot of people wait and then they do a refresher course and have notes. There's special courses out there that can prepare you purely for the FE1s, because they're slightly different to college exams in the sense that there's no real essays, that they're much more practical problem-based questions, like the problem-based ones you'd get in college exams. And also you can't really predict what's going to come up the way you might be able to in your college-based exams. So the 8 subjects then you must do are company law, constitutional law, law of contract, criminal law, European Union law, equity, real property, and law of tort. And some of those are kind of known to be a bit easier than other ones. Some of them are broader, like European Union law, for example, is quite notorious as being quite broad, and so it's totally up to you anyway how you decide to sit them, but you must sit all 8. Okay, thanks, Elaine. So once you get the FE1s, they're the hardest exams over, because the exams that will come up in Blackhall Place and professional practice courses are all open book. So that's a huge relief. But actually, as I said earlier, probably one of the hardest things to do is to secure that training contract. And you can't enter Blackhall Place, even if you have all your FE1s, without that training contract. So you might have heard about the milk round process, and that normally happens around September time. And there are application forms to be done online for this. So that's one route. Then you'll have the career fairs at different universities, and I know we I think generally attend the one at the University of Limerick, and it's a great opportunity to come and talk to people from the offices, and even try and network, as Elaine said. And a lot of, I suppose, being a solicitor is the business of law, and a lot of business is about relationships. So if people can put a face to your name, or if you can ask questions, you get a more of an insight into those different firms. It's a really good opportunity. Updating your CV is obviously really important, especially if you've got any work experience and preparing for interviews. So I have been on the recruitment panel here in the past for trainees, and I would always say really try and tailor your CV and prepare for the interview you're going for. So obviously you've done your research on the firm, but if you can get any kind of legal experience, even unpaid, in a law firm, it will stand you because it's a very competitive environment. So you can show that, you know it's something that you really want, and also you understand what life is like in a law firm. But even if you haven't, to try and explain how the skills you have developed in other jobs could be used as a trainee. And at the end of the day, a trainee is there to be trained and to learn. So it's about having the willingness and the skill set to be able to take on that role. Another good tip is to keep your social media pages up to date, and also, follow firms you're interested in, and keep an eye out for when they're advertising for vacancies. And the Law Society of Ireland also advertise regularly for job vacancies, which do include training contracts. And finally, just on securing that training contract, I would say be prepared for rejections. They're so common, it happens to all of us. And follow up if you do get a rejection for feedback, because oftentimes we can do something or miss something that we just don't realise, and that feedback will stand to you in the next interview. Thanks, Elaine. So Coop Place, then, once you've secured that all important training contract, you can then apply to be accepted into the Law Society. And as I said, you do the professional practice courses, which I understand from now on are two separate courses. So they've got different subjects, but they will run consecutively going forward. Thanks, Elaine. So in the professional practice course 1, that normally takes place September to March and covers a foundation course, applied land law, probate and tax, business law, litigation from a civil and criminal point of view, legal practice Irish, and then a number of skills. And those subjects are all very practical. You're given manuals, or sometimes they use iPads with the information, iPad minis, I should say, with the information downloaded onto them. And it's open book exams. So it's really about understanding things, knowing where to find answers, as opposed to rote learning. Thanks, Elaine. So I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just going to run through these. The professional practice course 2 then has 4 compulsory subjects: the professional practice course, conduct and management, family law, employment law, and English property law. And if we go to the next slide, then there's a number of electives that are included, and basically you can pick 3. And this is just a really good opportunity. At this stage, you'll have had more of an idea of what you're interested in, or maybe what your firm wants you to, areas your firm wants you to work in. So you can pick specific modules or electives that you're interested in. So that's a good opportunity to do that. Thanks, Elaine. Then, as I said, there's this new hybrid professional practice course, and it does seem like a really good idea. Just from a practical point of view, it used to be very difficult for students to get accommodation for 6 months, go back to their office, and then try and get it again for 3 months. So I think it's a positive thing, and there's good continuity just to get all that training done kind of in one 10-month block. Thanks, Elaine. Then finally, you're a solicitor. It is a long journey, and it felt very long to me at the time, but looking back, the time has flown. So when I graduated and did my FE1s, I was also working in a small practice in Limerick, getting experience. And then when I got my FE1s, I moved to Dublin, and I worked unpaid for 8 weeks, and I networked, and I joined a professional indemnity firm that was part of a leading international law firm with headquarters in England. And I applied for training contracts in Dublin. And when I was offered one and told the, firm where I was working that I was going to take it, they then decided to actually offer me an even better contract. And I stayed there and did my training with them. So they're called DWF. They used to be called Fishburns. And I had an excellent training contract with them, and it solidified my love of litigation, and it enabled me then, when I decided to move back to Limerick to join Holmes Assist in the private client litigation department of Holmes Malley Sexton LLP. And then as the years went on, I was promoted from, say, junior solicitor to an associate to a senior associate to more recently partner. So just the next one there, thanks Elaine. So just to let you know very quickly, if you're interested in getting experience whilst you're doing your undergrad or postgrad with a view to securing a training contract, these are some options at our firm in Limerick, Cork and Dublin, where you can gain an insight into life as a trainee. The first one is a summer internship, so you must have completed at least 1 year of your undergraduate degree, and you can work with us for 2 weeks or 1 month. It says there's an application deadline of February 2022. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Just email your CV and cover letter to the email that's on the screen there, and let them know that you're interested in that, because vacancies can come up, you know, on an ad hoc basis as well. And then on the next slide, Elaine, thanks. We obviously have the co-op placement that most of you are probably aware of at this stage. And you'll all know your times for that, and you contact your own co-op office there. And we certainly have one with Holmes Assist. I think there's a gentleman with Holmes as well. And as I said, it was co-op that I suppose solidified the desire in me to go on and become a solicitor, so it's an excellent opportunity. And then finally, we have the graduate internship, if you want to just go to, yeah, thanks Elaine, at Holmes Assist. So this would be a much longer internship. It's paid, it's for September on 1 year, or sorry, you apply between September and October usually, and it's 9 months in duration, and you get time off for study and exam leave for the FE1s. And a lot of our graduate interns go on and secure training contracts because they demonstrate how they fit into the firm, and they, you know, get an insight from the people who work in the firm how to, you know, best prepare for their interviews. And it's been a great way for us to get to know potential trainees and for trainees to secure training contracts also. So I hope I didn't rush through that too much, Elaine. I was just conscious of time.
Great. That's great. Thanks a million, Rachel. And maybe what we'll do actually is hold questions till the end of both presentations, if that's okay. That was super, and I think that was really, really insightful. Great structure and kind of presentation in terms of giving students an insight into what's involved, you know, once they complete their program of study, and are thinking of, you know, following that career path, your career path to becoming a solicitor. So thanks a million. I will just upload Michael's slides now, and whenever, hopefully you'll see them now momentarily. Michael, again, I think I may need to present for you. Sometimes you can take control of the presentation, but it didn't seem to move forward for Rachel. So if you want to try,
I will try it. For now, it's indicating that maybe I can do it. So
yeah,
when I run aground, I'll ask
perfect.
you. Just before I actually start, Elaine, maybe you can just tell me how long you'd like me to be, just to keep manners on me, perhaps.
So yeah, keep manners on you. So we have until about 1:15, so 15 to 20 minutes, and then that will give us a few minutes at the end for questions. And indeed, if any students have questions as they're, you know, going through and have listened to Rachel and as they're listening to Michael, use the chat function. So they can feel free to drop questions into the chat function, and I'll monitor those as well while the presentation is ongoing. So that'd be great. Thanks. So in around that 15 to 20, if that's okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Elaine, and thanks, Rachel, for really putting the bar very high there in terms of packing an incredibly informative presentation in such a short time. So there's the gauntlet's really laid down to me, and I'm not going to match it, I'm sure. My name is Michael Hourigan. I work as a barrister, and hopefully what I can do this afternoon is just give you a few kind of brief insights in terms of, number one, the journey or the trajectory in terms of qualifying as barrister and working in the courts, and also just at the end to answer questions you might have. In terms, I suppose, of my perception, and this goes right back to when I was a student, of how people would view a potential career at the bar, I think it's probably safe to say, and you'll correct me on this in questions if I'm wrong, but it's probably safe to say that most people, their default choice is probably to be a solicitor. And there are good reasons for that, because obviously a solicitor, you're front of house, you're at the coalface in terms of dealing with clients. And very importantly, straight off, you hopefully have a job. Because unlike being a solicitor or being a barrister, you don't have a job in the normal sense. You're self-employed. So in that sense, you've perhaps more in common with someone who's running a sweet shop, or any small business of their own. Many solicitors, of course, are sole trader, or sorry, have their own practice and work by themselves. But I'm just conscious that certainly when I was a student, that there was a sense that a career at the bar would be less secure, wouldn't have the same stability, and therefore it might be less attractive, or not the default choice. And those are all perfectly good reasons, I suppose, to be less inclined in the first instance towards a career at the bar. But in terms just of, I suppose, firstly outlining my own trajectory, just very briefly, I'm from Limerick myself. I'm from Castletroy. My primary degree was in English and Communication. So unlike most of you, my primary degree was not in law, and that will have relevance to certain things that I discuss with you. Am I correct in assuming that, Elaine, that all of our people tuning in are in fact law students?
The majority would be, Michael, but we would have invited all students to attend. But I think in terms of those that sign up, yeah.
Okay. Well, as I say, I had a background doing an English Communications degree. And perhaps somewhat insanely studying English, I managed to end up doing Erasmus in Italy. That's another story. But as you can see there from the fourth point, my entry into law was via the LLB graduate entry course, which I commenced in 1999, and that was a 2-year course and probably still is. After that, I went on to do the Barrister at Law degree at the King's Inns, which was part-time over 2 years. And I'll stop there, because as people who are now considering whether or not to, for example, study for the bar or to train as a solicitor, obviously you'll want to know what the route is. Once you qualify, or once you have a law degree, you can then sit the entrance exams, which I think there are about 4 or 5 of those, and you can seek to enter into the Barrister at Law degree. Which can be done 2 years, as you see I did, part-time over 2 years, or you can do it full-time in 1 year. If you're coming from a non-law route and you're a graduate, you can do a 2-year diploma in the King's Inns, which then allows you to go on and do the degree, which I did. So as I said, there are 2 routes. As a non-law graduate, you can do a diploma over 2 years, part-time in King's Inns, and then do the Barrister at Law degree, either full-time in 1 year or part-time over 2, or you can go straight in, so to speak, as law graduates to do the Barrister at Law degree. In terms of the course that one does in the King's Inns, that really is divided between practice and procedure, be it civil practice and procedure, criminal practice and procedure, and evidence. And then you do a lot of the practical things that barristers are required to do. You learn advocacy skills, you do courses in alternative dispute resolution, you deal with how to conduct a consultation with clients, you're trained in the way of writing opinions, and by that I mean, for example, that if a client goes to a solicitor with a query as to a particular legal issue, it might be that the solicitor will contact a barrister and ask them for their opinion in terms of how matters would play out if it went to court. You'd also, the King's Inns, study things such as ethics. You would be required to take courses in relation to your practice management. You do mock trials and so forth. So as you can see, those are kind of really they're matters that go to the day-to-day work of a barrister. I myself was called to the bar in 2004, and I came down to the bar or commenced practice in 2006, and I think I've sandwiched in there just as I was traveling in the intervening period, because many of you are probably considering doing something like that after your studies, and if you are, if you can do it, it's something that I'd recommend. It's an old cliche, travel broadens the mind, but any opportunity you have to go out and see the world is going to hold you in good stead, no matter what career you do, in my view. Again, I'm perhaps repeating myself slightly here. I initially did an arts degree, and then I went into law. I had been involved in certain things in UL, such as debating and so forth, which, you know, gave me a kind of an interest in the kind of things that you do, working as a barrister, arguing, being on your feet, and so forth. And because I'd studied a primary degree in English, I would have, I thought perhaps I might do a PhD in that, but I kind of realized, you know, I'm not as smart as the people who write these books that I like. So instead, I decided to get into a profession. And you can see I put question marks after security of a profession, because the reality is that working as barrister, it has all of the ups and downs of being self-employed. So, you know, you don't have to pretend you're busy for some pesky boss. You can go off to the cinema if you're finished for the day. But the flip side is, if you're busy, you can't just down tools at 5 o'clock on a Friday. You might have to work through the weekend. And again, that's just the nature of the work. Now, Rachel is thinking correctly. Well, it's not that solicitors can just down tools at 5 o'clock on a Friday if they like either, and they have to take work home, and that's absolutely true. And perhaps what I'm saying is perhaps more rooted in the past. But in terms of my journey towards law, the immediacy and the excitement of court work and being on your feet was something which attracted me to the law, and indeed to working at the bar, because, you know, it's obviously people have an interest in the human drama of what goes on in courtrooms, and that's why we have so many TV shows which are centered around it. And it's, you know, it's probably one of the reasons why a great deal of you wanted to study law in the first place. That excitement, that immediacy, that cut and thrust. And obviously the bar is a very broad church, and you have people who might not be in court, even though they're barristers. They might not be in court every day. They might be doing work which is to a huge extent in the area of writing opinions, or doing paperwork. For example, if you had a probate practice, and you know, you probably wouldn't be in court every day. However, if, for example, you're a criminal lawyer, which is what I am, or you're involved as in the area of litigation, which is Rachel's area, the whole point of your job is to be in court. And personally, that's what attracted me, and that's a very important point is in what I've described my journey towards law. But the next slide I've entitled "Starting Out as a Barrister." So I suppose that's maybe I'm kind of leapfrogging ahead, but that's working on the assumption that you are interested in pursuing a career at the bar. Well, what happens next? You've gone to the King's Inns, you've done your course over a year or 2 years, and then you have to decide, well, I'm now qualified as a barrister. Do I want to practice as a barrister? Because a great number of people train at the King's Inns, get called to the bar, and for whatever reason decide, I'm glad to have this qualification, but I'm just going to keep it in my back pocket, and I'll go and do something else. And there's a long tradition of people doing that. And every year, certainly when I was in the King's Inns, there were a great number of people who worked, for example, in various state bodies or indeed in private companies, and they would qualify as barristers and they would use the skills that they'd accrued during the course, but they might not necessarily practice. But if you are interested in practice, well, then you have certain decisions to make in terms of how you're going to go forward from there. Firstly, I suppose you might want to decide what kind of an area you'd work in. Traditionally, barristers, when the bar was a lot smaller, did a little bit of everything. And so, for example, one day you'd be doing a civil matter, another day you'd be doing a criminal matter. But increasingly, and this is the case with solicitors also, people obviously have become far more specialized, and that's just a feature of modern life. So you would ideally, I suppose, having qualified as a barrister and having decided to come down to work in the courts, want to identify somebody who does the kind of work that you do. And you can see that I've said choosing a master who practices in your areas of interest, because when you begin at the bar, you're under the tutelage of what's called a master. So, for example, I am a master, and I have what's called a devil who's my pupil. And every year somebody comes under my wing, so to speak, in that capacity. And it's not dissimilar to being an apprentice, really, as a solicitor would be, that you're learning your trade under somebody who has the experience in the area in which you wish to practice. So that involves, usually on the most basic level, perhaps making a decision, well, whether or not you want to be a civil or a criminal lawyer. Because now, certainly in Dublin, and it's less the case, obviously, in Limerick, although it is the case, that the civil and the criminal bar are divided into separate buildings. There is now a separate criminal building in Limerick, which means that from a practical point of view, it's much harder for people to be practicing both in civil and in criminal. And that's the case here in Dublin also for a number of years, because there's a specialised criminal building. Now, which is not to say it's impossible. I do a certain amount of civil work, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but you might want to decide which it is that you want to do. Well, you all know what criminal law is, and you're all so I'm not going to explain what that is. And you know what civil law is too. So you'll probably know by now which areas you're keener on, and for whatever reason. I myself, and I think I've said this elsewhere, I was particularly inspired by my lectures in UL in criminal, and as I say, the immediacy of it was something which really made an impression on me. And it was Paul McCutcheon who was my criminal law lecturer, and possibly Rachel's as well. And that had an effect on me, and I decided I want to be a criminal lawyer. So going back to the first point, I identified somebody who was practicing primarily in criminal law. I approached them and asked, could I devil for them? And that's quite an informal process. Literally, I receive emails or phone calls from people who are in the King's Inns, or even like yourselves who haven't even started yet, and say, I'm planning on becoming a barrister. I'm about to start in King's Inns, so would you be available as a master in 2 years' time? And people just do it on that basis. There's no application process. It's all quite informal, and people ring you up or they send you an email, and you respond yes, usually in my case, and just hope for the best. Some people are more rigorous in terms of wanting CVs and sitting down interviews and whatever else. But touch wood, it's all gone okay for me and for my devils so far. The next point I think I've identified there, the financial challenges working for free. So as you've probably all heard by now, and this is something which you've perhaps have factored into your deliberations, when you begin work as a barrister, you're not paid. Your master is obliged to pay your fees, which as a newly qualified barrister, or sorry, as someone who's just started at the law library, approximately €3,500 per year. Your master will pay for those. He'll probably pay for your lunches. He'll probably give you money to go for a few drinks here and there. But you will need to factor in other costs, obviously, in terms of, firstly, your living expenses. All newly barristers who commence practice are obliged to do their first year in Dublin. So that's going to be a challenge for most people. I myself am not from Dublin either. And so you're going to have some kind of support or income yourself. So you can see I've written working on the side while at Devil. I worked 4 or 5 days a week, worked in the evenings. I had 3 jobs. I tutored law, I taught English, did various things. And it worked out okay for me. The day-to-day life as a devil really means that you are doing whatever it is your master, within reason, of course, that your master asks you to do. So, for example, my devil today, he's in court covering for me, saying that I'm elsewhere when I'm elsewhere, asking judges to keep the case on hold, so to speak, until I arrive there, hopefully not testing their patience too much. He's also required to research things for me. If something comes up in court in the middle of a trial and I need something checked that I don't have access to, he will run to the library or she, in the case, obviously, if it's a female devil, and get those things for you. And really, it is kind of an osmosis process, because by doing all of those things and seeing, the things that your master does right, and indeed the things your master makes a hames of, that hopefully you yourself figure out how to conduct the business of being a barrister yourself in court. So you really just kind of learn it on the job, so to speak, as in most things. In terms of starting your own practice, usually by the end of your first year, you're going to hopefully be picking up little bits and pieces and small cases. In civil, that means, for example, doing motions, which are usually quite straightforward. In criminal law, maybe dealing with less serious criminal matters in the district court that solicitors might ask you to do. And you can see I've said small cases. So certainly in the case of criminal law, that means doing things which are pretty minor, and where even if it goes all disastrously wrong, your client isn't going to go to prison for too long. And obviously you make your way up, and the more you prove yourself, hopefully, the more responsibility and stress you're given as a result. So that year on year, for example, as you're a criminal lawyer, the bigger the consequences for your client and the more serious the crime, or if you're a civil lawyer, the bigger I suppose the financial or other implications there might be for your client if things go right or wrong. My practice, I work primarily in the areas of criminal prosecution and defence, which means I take cases on either side depending on who calls you first. And obviously, you all know what criminal prosecution and defence entail. I also, when I said I do civil practice also, I work in the area of administrative law, judicial review, which perhaps, I'm not sure what familiarity you would have with that, but that normally means high court applications where you're challenging the process in respect of perhaps matters which have been dealt with by public bodies. The most obvious example you'll have heard of obviously are things like challenges to the High Court of planning decisions on Board Planola, things like that. Or it could be something that happens, for example, in relation to somebody's access to education or their rights in some other way. I also do a certain amount of regulatory and disciplinary work, which again, for example, involving the professions, doctors and nurses who perhaps come into difficulty. But again, I'm working on the premise that you're familiar with most of those things anyway. As I said at the outset of my life, as a criminal lawyer, I work mostly, and probably about 90% of my work is in the criminal courts. One thing I suppose, inevitably people are going to think about in terms of being a barrister, would I like being on my feet? Is this a very nerve-wracking experience? Is that pressurized? Well, I suppose the first thing to say is always be suspicious of people who are overly confident immediately, because there's good reason for nerves. They usually keep manners on you, and they mean that you're taking something seriously. So there's nothing wrong with being nervous at the start. And as in anything in life, when you've done it a number of times, it becomes more easy and straightforward. And I suppose, moreover, again, when you see other people, being really mediocre and poor, and you start saying, well, I can do that, and I can do that better than him or her, and maybe that will give you confidence too. I'm being a little bit glib, but there's a certain amount of truth in it also. I was talking about small cases. You're gonna hopefully cut your teeth doing kind of small things, which if you do well, will lead to better work, and that's the case in civil or criminal work, presumably. Just because I'm running on time, I'm going to unfortunately race through some of the remaining points. As a criminal lawyer, obviously, primarily your main business every day is doing jury trials. And that has the kind of drama associated with it, oftentimes, that you'd expect it to. And it's really about making your case digestible, really, for ordinary members of the public who are having to decide on the innocence or guilt of an accused person. I think, given that we're about to run out of time, I'll probably have to leave over the long discussion on how you defend guilty people, because you probably answer this in the pub to your friends who don't study law anyway, which is that, well, it's a job and you don't get to decide whether someone is innocent or guilty, and you know the answer to that. So I'll probably leave it. The difference between prosecuting and defending cases, well, I suppose in one instance you're charged with creating something and keeping something standing, and on the other one you're charged with throwing stones and bricks at that same thing until it collapses and falls down. When you're defending a case, because of course, as you know, accused persons don't have to prove anything, but prosecutors have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and they have the responsibility to do that. Moving on, the pros and cons of being a barrister. It is immediate. It's interesting work. I think no matter what area of practice you're in, there is a great cut and thrust to it. And there's variety, certainly. Every day is different, and again, this applies to you also if your ambition is to run your own solicitor's practice, for example. You have the freedom to develop your own business, and that, of course, is very rewarding, because you get to see on a very immediate level your practice grow and develop. It might be that that's something you're not interested in. You might just say, well, no, I would just rather see myself in a law firm and progress through there and hopefully make partner and take pride in all of that. I'd move on to say stress and pressure, but again, Rachael, I'm sure, would deprecate any suggestion on my part that the bar was unique in terms of providing stress and being a place where there was pressure. I mean, the reality is that's all jobs nowadays. But one thing, obviously, that does apply is that you're only as good as your last case at the bar, and that's what people remember. So you do always have the pressure of making sure that you do each case as if it were your last. In terms of insecurity, well, the reality is that if you're developing your own business, there's no guarantees of anything in life, but you'll know what your own skills and talents are, and if you are determined and you're lucky enough that what small cases you did get went well for you, and that was duly recognised by people, that's going to lead on to other things. After it will take a couple of years, and you'll have heard this elsewhere. It will take you a couple of years before you're probably in a position to stand on your own 2 feet. And certainly in my own case, and this applies to a great number of people, for the first number of years, I was having to work, in the evenings and at weekends. But I was glad to do it. It made me more determined to develop my practice, which thankfully I'm still here anyway. And as I said, you're as good as your last case. So who knows what will happen in my next one. But and hopefully what I've said is of some use to you, but I think I'm happy to. I think we're just on time there, aren't we, Elaine? So I'll finish on that, and I look forward to answering any questions you have.
That's super. Thanks a million, Michael. And you didn't put up your last slide, which I really liked. The monkey with the banana.
Well, sorry,
Any questions? That's okay. No. I think it's great having the two of you on screen. Thank you to you both. I think that was hugely informative, and just I think so insightful to have both professions presented side by side for people. It gives an awful lot of information on I suppose the complexities and the paths in both, the time frame for both, and the passion that you both obviously have, like kind of for the profession and the interest in it. So I think that was really beneficial for myself and all of the students. What I might do is actually stop recording now and then maybe deal with the questions. We just have a few minutes. So let me just find the stop record. Brilliant.